Hi guys, welcome back to our lesson for today. So we are still trying to look at factorizing rules. Right now we're going to take it further to what do we mean when we say something is a trinomial, and what are these guidelines that we need in order to solve a trinomial. So let's just look at it. All right, so firstly we must talk about what is a binomial before we can even move on to a trinomial. A binomial will be an expression of the sum or the difference of two terms. Because of the bi, it's always about 2. When you multiply two binomials, what is it that you get? You form a trinomial. So that's where the trinomial comes from. That's why I said we first look at what a binomial is in order to make sense of what a trinomial is. The last thing about a binomial is these two binomial terms, are the factors of the trinomial. So if I have two brackets like this, and there is a binomial and another binomial here, if I multiply them using the expanding rules, I get a trinomial. This first bracket and this second bracket, we then call them the factors of that particular trinomial that we will get if we were to expand that. So a trinomial will be an algebraic expression. It doesn't matter what the signs are as long as it has 3 terms. It can be plus, it can be minus, not multiply and not division, definitely. So either plus or minus, because as soon as it becomes a multiply, it's no longer a lot of terms, it's just one term, because A times B times C is just one term and not a lot of terms. The most common trinomials that can be factorized have the same variable raised to different powers, right? So you can't say you're going to factorize a trinomial that does not have the same variable and you want to factorize it using binomials. You really cannot. So I have a squared plus 4a minus 12. The variable here is a, so the first exponent is 2, the second exponent is 1, the third exponent, although we hardly write it, is actually 0. Because remember that a to the exponent of 0 is 1. So 12 times 1 is the same as 12. So you can see that the exponents are always in descending order of the variables, not the numbers. The numbers, we don't really look at their exponents. Now, factorizing a trinomial requires you to write it as a product of two binomials, as we saw in the previous slide. Now, let's look at some rules to factorize a trinomial. Firstly, make sure that the order is correct. What am I talking about? Make sure that the exponents are in descending order, because that's the standard form of a trinomial, right? The coefficients do not really matter as long as the variables, exponents, are in descending order, then it is in a correct order. Number 2, always test for a common factor. If there is no common factor, then you follow these golden rules that I'm just going to give you here. You look at the sign of the last term, right? So what do I mean? If I give you ax squared plus bx plus c, or ax squared plus bx minus c, right? These are two examples. One has the last term as a positive, the other one has the last term as a negative. That's the sign you look at, and that's the sign that's going to inform you what nature your brackets are going to be. If the last term is a positive, as my first example there, it means that my two brackets can either be positive and positive or negative and negative. I will tell you just now what determines whether positive or negative and negative. Lastly, my second example, if the last term is a negative, then it means definitely your brackets will be a plus and a minus. And remember, I will still say, my personal view at all times is always try to start with a plus. It just gives you that zing for mathematics, and it sets the tone for you to do the right thing. Now let's go back to the positive one. If the last term is a positive, it means it's either plus, plus, or minus, minus. How do you then determine whether plus, plus, or minus, minus? You look at the middle term. If the middle term is a plus, then it's definitely a positive and a positive. If the middle term is a minus, then it is definitely a negative and a negative. Let me give you examples of what I'm talking about. So, if I have maybe 2x squared plus 4x plus 2, like this, right? Let me just make it 3 so that there is no common factor. The last term is a plus, then definitely my two brackets will be plus and plus, right? Let's look at another example. If I have 2x squared minus 4x plus 3. The last term is still a plus, but now what has changed is the middle term. The middle term is now a negative, so that makes my two brackets to be minus and minus instead of a plus and a plus. But at a later stage, we're going to look at examples in great detail. So let's look at a squared plus 4a minus 12, the example I started with when we spoke about a trinomial. You're always going to look at the factors of 12 in pairs. So I prefer listing the ones on my left in ascending order and the ones on my right in descending order. So it's 1, it goes with the 12, it's 2, it goes with the 6, it's 3, it goes with the 4. In all these 3 pairs that I have, I must choose a pair such that when I add or subtract, I get 4. I will repeat. In all these 3 pairs, I must choose a pair such that when I add or subtract, I get a positive 4. So it must either be the 6 minus 2, right? That's the only one really that can be that. I was thinking I can use another example, but that will just confuse us. Then you test which factors can add up to the middle term, as I said. Now, the factors that can add up to the middle term will be the 2 and the 6, so that's what we are going to use in order to then factorize this. Remember, what did I say? If the last term is a minus, what does that mean? My two brackets will be a plus and a minus. I always start with a plus. But now, whenever you have a bigger factor and a smaller factor, the bigger factor always gets the sign of the middle term. Maybe let me repeat that so you can take it down. The bigger factor always takes the sign of the middle term. So it means this will be the plus and that will be the minus. Why is that the case? It's because I want that when you add them and subtract them, you must get a positive 4. So if it became plus 2 minus 6, this will give me negative 4, you see. So it is not what I want. But what I actually want is minus 2 plus 4, which will, plus 6, I mean, which will definitely give me a positive 4. I was already thinking of what the answer is supposed to be. And now we use the associative property for multiplication, remember. It states that when 3 or more numbers are multiplied, the product is the same regardless, right? So you always look at the associative property when you're trying to factorize a trinomial. So you're always gonna group them and use the parentheses or brackets to group these numbers, right? And this is one type, again, of factorizing under a trinomial. That's why I'm talking about the associative property. You identify the same common factor, number 1. You make sure that each bracket is in its simplest form. So I have one bracket which is 3x squared plus 2x. Another bracket which is 12x plus 8. I must take out a common factor in each bracket such that what I will remain with in the bracket is the same in both the brackets. So the common factor of the first one here will be just x, and then in the brackets I will have 3x plus 2. The common factor of the second one will be 4, and I will be left with 3x plus 2. And you can already see that that will then be my common factor as well, with the 3x plus 2. Hence, when I factorize this, it will then give me x plus 4, 3x plus 2. And that's how you will then factorize using what we call grouping. Then the last two things that you just need to look at quickly will be the sum of two cubes and the difference of two cubes. So this is just something that I thought if you were to just jot this down, it will form a rule on how to then factorize a sum of cubes. If it's a sum, the first bracket that you're always going to write will always have a plus, and then the last term of the bigger bracket will always be a plus. And then lastly, the middle term of the trinomial, or rather of the other bracket, the bigger bracket, will always be the different sign to the sum that is there. And for the difference of this, it is more or less the same rule that we are using here. If it's a minus here, the first bracket must be a minus. The second term there will always be an opposite of that, meaning plus, but the last term will always be a plus. So please just jot down these rules. I will show you when we do examples of how exactly do you then apply this when trying to factorize the sum of cubes or the difference of cubes. But for now, because we've been saying a lot, I will be back just after the ad break to then apply all of this into practicality so we can see how do we apply all these rules that I've been talking about. Stay tuned.